Viewers, thank you for making a date with us this Friday afternoon, and we are here to put perspective and context into issues that have made headlines in the past couple of days here in Uganda. One is the aspect and the scandal in the office of the Prime Minister on the Karamoja issues. We know that iron sheets went missing. We know that now we have discovered that goats are missing, as well as maize during the COVID-19 lockdown. But also we know that later on we shall examine aspects of our economy, not limited to how the NRM has handled aspects of accountability, but also the budgetary cycle of the Ministry of Finance generally. And to put this into context is a panel of immaculate senior citizens of this country that it's now my pleasure to introduce to you, and in no particular order. From the extreme left is a person who I think I now refer to as a regular on this show, and that is retired Major Awich Pollar, who is the Director of External Relations at the NRM Secretariat. Retired Major, thank you for being here.
Thank you, viewers, greetings.
I saw you had our Chinese communists. Have they left already, or they're still here?
Oh, they are leaving at 6. True, I picked them up on Friday with Honorable Mike Mukula. I stayed with them yesterday. We had a series of meetings. We had bilateral talks at the Secretariat. We had one other talk at the embassy, and then I took them to meet the Vice President. So yesterday I had a hectic day with them, but they're okay, they're good, they're happy.
All right. I don't know what to think about the OPM scandal, but well. Next to our retired major is Honorable Aleper Moses, who is Member of Parliament of Chekwii County in Moroto District. Mheshimiwa, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Viewers.
Okay. Next to Honorable is the only lady on the show this afternoon, and that's the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance, Dr. Sarah Bireete. Doctor, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes, from the Uganda People's Congress, that is Congressman Joseph Ochieno, who is, of course, also a regular on this show. We have missed him for some time, but we are glad to have him one more time.
It's a pleasure to be back, but it's very sad that I'm back on the similar and same situations, and lamenting about the destruction of my country on this occasion. My solidarity with those people whose resources have been squandered, and particularly amongst the most needy communities in this country, Karamoja, just like bits of my own Bukedi.
Well, thank you. Let's start with someone who at least comes from this particular sub-region. Honorable Aleper, first of all, do we know whether these iron sheets were meant for Karamoja or whether these goats were meant for Karamoja? Because what we hear and what we know is that under the OPM, there are affirmative action regions. There is Teso, there is Northern Uganda, among others. So do we know that these iron sheets were procured ab initio from the word go and they were meant for Karamoja?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to give a short background to all this. As most of Ugandans know, that Karamoja has been dogged with insecurity right from the past. And this particular time round, there had been some relative peace, but in 2019, insecurity kept him back. And it peaked in 2021, May. And when other leaders with us, the members of parliament, moved around, we really got a consensus. There was a concern in the region that there is need for disarmament. And that's what we reported back to the executive when we interacted with His Excellency, the President of Uganda. So it was agreed that this would be done. And one of the interventions was actually is providing alternative livelihoods for the disarmed people. These are the Karachunas from Karamoja. And the intervention was three-pronged. One of them was the provision of iron sheets for decent living, and then the other was provision of goats for wealth creation. We actually zeroed on goats because it would be one way of enhancing quick wealth creation, because goats are easily quick multiplying than maybe oxen or cows. So that's why we zeroed on that. And then the other intervention actually was mobilization and peace initiatives, which is so much software that nobody speaks about it. It is also one area we have requested the Committee on Presidential Affairs to look at it. So that's how the intervention came, and the implementation was premised on a supplementary budget which was passed by Parliament in November 2021, and the funds were released in early third quarter, that's in January 2022. And when we had an interaction with the Ministry of Karamoja Affairs about the implementation model, we were told by that time, because we wanted to vary certain issues. One, we were saying, how can this money get plowed or trickle down to the region? One, from Abatis, maybe we would get some stockists who have that money, who have hardware stocking units there, so that they become maybe suppliers. The other one was the goats could be got from the region, because one, we need a goat species that can manage actually that type of climate. So that the intervention is seamless. But of course, we were told that no, the procurement had already taken off and it would be difficult to reverse it, which we actually succumbed to. So fast forward, in June, around the 7th June 2022, the President of the Republic of Uganda was called to Moroto to launch the program, the interventions, those 3 areas. And on that day, they distributed 650 iron sheets to some Karachunas, the disarmed warriors, and then also some goats. And he assured the Karamojans then that in 3 weeks' time, the whole thing will be rolled out. Now, 9 months after that, because it's 9 months since June 2022, there have been no deliveries of iron sheets. Though some goats have been delivered, and of course with so many challenges. Challenges are, one, the goats were procured from districts that were on quarantine. We are talking about Kasanda, we are talking about Gomba and other districts that were already on quarantine. The technical arm of the Ministry of Agriculture that should have been there to help in the verification, to make sure that the specifications that were put in LPOs, the deliveries were matching, that was not involved. So most of the animals that came sick, and most of them died, and even infected the flocks that were there.
Could they fit in the semi-arid climate?
Yeah, it was of course a challenge. One, they were sick, and then it is not that type of climate is not easy. In fact, some livestock from some parts of Karamoja cannot survive in other parts. Like cows from Pokot, that's Amuda district, cannot still survive in places like Nablatuk district because of the difference in the conditions there. So what am I saying? I'm saying that that's what happened. The deliveries were made. Most goats were lost. In fact, there's a district, Nablatuk, understand, they lost 70% of the animals that were the goats that were delivered. They died within that very time.
So, Honorable, at least you're confirming to us that the goats were delivered.
Some goats.
Some goats were delivered.
Yeah, not all. Now, with iron sheets, which actually was a trigger, other than the 1,000 that were brought for the launch, no other iron sheets have been taken to Karamoja. And you know what is really shocking is, not even one delivery was made to the beneficiaries. There were 5,000 beneficiaries for those iron sheets. And according to the plan, it was supposed to be 100,000 iron sheets. But you can imagine launching on the 7th, the first, yesterday when we had an interaction with the Minister for Karamoja, Honorable Dr. Kitutu, according to her response to the question, she said that she donated. You can imagine.
She donated?
She donated to our colleagues. You can imagine something that is meant as an intervention for a certain group of people who are disadvantaged. Someone decides to donate.
She became a church organization.
Honorable, just clarity on that, because, and that's why I asked from the word go, that do we know whether these particular iron sheets were meant for Karamoja sub-region? Because like I said, the OPM harbors or is a house to many affirmative action sub-regions. So are we sure, or do we know that these particular iron sheets that were given away to other districts were meant for Karamoja?
Individuals, not districts.
Yeah, I want to authoritatively say, normally, under the affirmative action ministries, the procurements for normal affirmative action, it was for Karamoja normal affirmative action, not this particular intervention, was for Karamoja and Acholi. And the MPs of Acholi, and normally that intervention of affirmative action is implemented through MPs. The MPs are given certain number of iron sheets. And then they distribute to beneficiaries, which beneficiaries actually must demonstrate they can be able to use these iron sheets. And for Karamoja, what used to happen is you make sure if I'm a beneficiary, I should put up a structure such that when these iron sheets are come, they are put. So it was only Acholi and Karamoja. And those are different iron sheets. In fact, I want to say that those iron sheets are these ordinary ones of gauge 30, not pre-painted. This general white, what we can call white iron sheets. But the pre-painted gauge 28 was specifically for this intervention. And nobody can tell me. And you know that one is very easy to reach to the bottom because the procurements are documented. There is an advert, there are definitely minutes, the thing, and then there are LPOs. So there's no way someone can say that there were iron sheets for other regions. Those are the only two regions, affirmative action regions, or departments within OPM that actually procured iron sheets for affirmative action. Different from this intervention, the gauge 28 pre-painted iron sheets were strictly for this intervention.
Okay, thank you.
So what I want also to say is, whoever is alleging that also other regions are good, someone should actually demonstrate to me if they were there for Bunyoro region, how many beneficiaries were there, how many MPs took them. If it was for Teso, how many MPs from Teso took. So there was no such a thing.
Okay.
And I think I should clarify it.
On that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
What was the third intervention? Sorry, I missed it.
The other one was actually software, that is mobilization and sensitization of the community.
And how is that?
Yeah, well, that one also needs to be actually looked into because, you know, we are talking about, it was supposed to facilitate a sensitization program for maybe members of parliament.
So
for the
Padian also
regional
has
council.
issues?
Yeah, in fact, it was supposed to be regional. There was one regional council meeting which actually that intervention facilitated, but I'm not very sure about some other peace meetings. So that one also will have to be looked into because their number, they were actually listed. So those are the areas. And then, of course, come in the food situation again. Yesterday, we had an interaction with the Uganda, in fact, Minister of Defense, about how they got all of the food that was meant for school children.
In Karamoja.
In Karamoja,
And they ate it.
the argument was that the UPDF was actually disadvantaged at that particular time, so they needed. But when we probed further, they said we were also told that there is some maize somewhere, and who told them? The very culprit. That's the Minister of Karamoja Affairs.
She donated to UPDF.
And also donated to UPDF. But of course, really the point of concern here is that food was meant for feeding school children, and that's what the program was intended for. And it went to the wrong people. All this is about diversion, is about arbitrary decisions by the minister to cost donations according to her. That's how she defined them. And you know, a donation in its very definition is something occasioned by a demand. But you know, a charity, there should be a charity that is making an appeal. So who made an appeal? Yesterday, Minister Kasaija said for him, he was just told iron sheets are in his home. So even such a donation wasn't occasioned by an appeal.
Just one question.
I want to bring you in actually.
Okay. Before I want to clarify. So when the UPDF took the maize, did they cook it in their mess and other areas, or they took to their homes? How has UPDF now eaten maize for Karamoja children?
According to the report, of course, they presented to the committee yesterday. This food was distributed to the army units within the region, according to the presentation from the Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs, which was represented by Honorable Both. Yeah, but I think the main issue is,
diversion. I just wanted to understand.
It's just diversion.
Doctor, my question is, of course, as we evaluate the Karamoja question, is that OPM has undergone so many scandals. You look at Chogam, you look at Temangalo, you look at the Gavi funds, and many others. Could there be more than meets the eye in the OPM?
No, I think really, one is that it is very clear to all Ugandans that the NRM regime is a scam. It is their policy is just about thuggery, and no good thing can be done. They are now operating from their depth, and they are naked in terms of their hidden intentions. I know that they are very highly educated and they can give good oratory speeches to Nduk people, but their intentions are now known. It is just a grabbing mechanism. Before I go to OPM and other scandals, I find that, we have been scandalized enough by the corruption of NRM regime. But to steal from the poorest of the poor, to steal from the extremely poor and disadvantaged Karamojong, for me is the risk that we should take as a country. I'm not saying stealing is okay, but just a few months ago, we were witnessing Karamojong dying of hunger.
Yeah.
We were watching live skeletons on TV as a population. And we were wondering how it was possible for that kind of negligence, to the extent that people starved to death and we are doing nothing as a country. As if that is not enough. I know that non-state actors are doing so much. I see, Pastor Kayanja planting maize. I think it's about to reach harvest. And he practically demonstrated what government ought to have done with simple irrigation. He has about 2 tractors. He has, and you're like, okay. So we have this government, 81 cabinet ministers, with a president, 37 years in power. And they cannot find common logic of mitigating simple things like famine. And people starve to death as they watch. So as if that is not enough, you grab from dying people. The goats, I'm sure if the goats had gone to some families, you reduce the danger to starvation. You are creating household incomes. If you put the iron sheets and people are able to have decent shelter, which helps them to settle down from nomadic temporary settlements to moving into semi-permanent settlements, you grab that. It's like monkeys grabbing bananas from tourists. So President Museveni is presiding over a cabinet of monkeys grabbing bananas on the roadside. And he cannot do anything about it because of his greed for power, because of patronage. He has no capacity to fight corruption. And that one, I would dare anyone to challenge me that President Museveni can fight corruption in this country. He cannot. I can substantiate. We are now in a governance pandemic in this country. It is scandal after scandal. Parliament has been diverted to working in an ad hoc mechanism to try to mitigate scandals of governance in this country. And nobody's doing business in a normal setup. President Museveni, with no end as to when he can retire, with reduced energy, which is a matter of biological science because of age, with limited inability to micromanage the style he had been using in power, but now he doesn't have energy to micromanage and supervise, with the destruction and weakness of institutions. It is a waste of time to think or even to imagine that President Museveni can fight corruption today. And that's why his cabinet ministers are behaving like monkeys, grabbing bananas from the extreme poor people in Karamoja. We have had a lineup of cabinet ministers, shamelessly, including people that have been in cabinet for like 30 years, like Matia Kasaija. And excuses, appalling excuses they are telling the country. I found iron sheets in my backyard. You know, like who can believe such nonsense? Who opens your house? Who has access to your gate to open and put iron sheets that you are not aware of? Iron sheets were sent in my district. So if they were sent in your district, were they put to the district headquarters? How come it is you with the power to determine where they should go? If iron sheets were sent to the district and taken to the district council hall, I would believe that what these leaders are saying has some bit of truth. Iron sheets are sent in your district. Who gave you powers to allocate them without even establishing the source? I want also to underscore the fact that even secondary school students in this country have an idea of how governments work. The budget process, the procurement processes, the distribution processes. So all these cabinet ministers that are telling lies in the parliament, that, oh, we didn't ask. If you are a government official, you know how government works. Even if somebody called you and said, I have iron sheets and I'm your colleague, isn't it common sense that I would ask the source of those iron sheets? Isn't it common sense that I would ask why you have chosen me as a recipient? Isn't it common sense? And isn't it therefore right to conclude that President Museveni and his cabinet no longer have common sense?
It is not right.
Retired Major, and if you read the poverty report that was published by the Ministry of Finance, Karamoja was among the regions that topped that particular report in terms of poverty. So the country waking up to incidents of people who are supposed to be out there rooting for citizens, instead taking what belongs to them. Of course, as they are right now, they are allegations, and we look forward to them being proved. But the question is that the aspect of corruption. I want to hear from you. What is your strategy as the NRM on how to deal with corruption? That is one. I know that at some point the IGG proposed the lifestyle audit that the president, I think, didn't seem very comfortable with. But I want to hear from you. What is the NRM's strategy on how to deal with corruption? Because as it stands, it looks like corrupt individuals just walk away with it.
Okay, thank you so much. I think for once, Sarah will be happy because I will agree with her on many issues. I'll agree with her on many issues and maybe define a few instances. So you can clap your hands. But I first want to answer a question that is squarely put to Honorable, that where was this iron seat in issue meant for Karamoja? I think the simple answer the Honorable has given, but I like to put it that yes, they were. Why? It was under what was called 18-month special intervention resolution for Karamoja. That was the titling of the resolution. And I've been laboring to get the text of the resolution so that I don't speak out of rumors. Lawyers are not expected to speak out of rumors or hearsay. So, but even without handling the text in my hand, the text of the resolution was 18 months special intervention for Karamoja. And this is, even if you look at the text of the resolution, it is meant for Karamoja. So we don't waste time on that. And even then, some members, even if it was not, which it is, some members have tended to widen their definition of
Karamoja.
Their definition of disaster. That even if an iron, a school in some district in the west was blown by wind, that amounts to disaster. That is for Ilaronet to do it. But for the avoidance of doubt, this was not even under Ilaronet. So even if you widen the definition of disaster, it doesn't fit. It was under the mandate of Minister for Karamoja.
And he has been on record, just
Yes.
to supplement
So
that.
it is.
This has nothing to do with disaster, and is
So
not a way
even if
of
you widen the
approachment.
definition of disaster, it doesn't fit. The resolution was specifically for Karamoja, and the funding of the resolution was specifically for Karamoja, and that is where the Aeon seats and the gods were born from. So I guess I supplement the answer to that.
Yeah.
Now, you see, if you pass a resolution for Karamoja, or let's say for West Nile, and then you divert it, then it defeats programming in government. Even if it was an NGO, you can't plan for X and do for Y. It defeats the science of program. Then when are you going to program? The programming was for a specific intervention. So it does not help in any way to say the health facilities in my constituency was uprooted, was blown off, so I took that of Karamoja. Now this takes me to the undertaking. Which undertaking did they have by the time they were taking it? Did they sign an undertaking that give me this for Karamoja because of emergency, I will refund it? Did they? That give me 300 iron seats for my place in Aleper in the case of Ubua, and that when I get my 300, I will bring it back. Nothing. It's like saying, give me for a jury, forget about those Karamoja. Really? Is that how we are supposed to work? It defeats programming. It is actually an insult to the beneficiary. So, did they have an undertaking? So everybody was just coming to get? If they were strict and polite to programming process, they would have made an undertaking that I'm taking this, I will refund. In fact, for now, they should be made to refund. I would even think should be cut from the salary. So, even now this takes me to the affirmative action that the Honorable was talking about. I know there was, even from our 10-point program, the 10-point program stated areas that needed redress right from 86. Karamoja, and then came to Luero, and there's the minister for Luero. Then over time, northern Uganda, because the war was brought in, and Teso. Those affirmative areas. But I'm also wondering that to do this affirmative action, you give iron seats to elected leaders, which we all know that elected leaders have their supporters. So I'll go give to my supporters, and I say affirmative action, give an iron seat to MPs. But so many other interventions, maybe for the case of iron seat, but so many interventions has been made to redress the areas right from the 10-point program, and it was extended. So, but even this one, I repeat, it was not on the affirmative area. Now, I think, having said all this, it is time, I think, for the chairman of our party to prove Sarah wrong.
He can't.
Sarah seems to think the chairman cannot fight corruption.
He's finished.
I'm really calling upon the chairman, why don't you for once prove Sarah wrong? Because it is easy to get...
Even if it means him sinking.
It is easy to get culpability. You can't be a minister for Karamoja and you simply issue out iron seats meant for Karamoja without any undertaking that I did. This of a jury has asked me that last night the wind blew off on health facilities. Let me give Honorable Obua of a jury to take, Obua will bring back.
But even that is not allowed in government.
It's just like forget about those Karamojong.
Even that is not allowed in government.
So now,
yeah.
No, if it is a commitment, I would to an extent. So now I am really thinking that my chairman will for once prove Sarah wrong. He will act.
Okay, but Honorable, sorry, Afande, as you assure us about how the chairman is going to act, is that in the recent past we have had issues of corruption. We saw the Gavi funds. The people that were accused in that particular scandal were censured, but later on reappointed to cabinet. We all know them. But also, we know that the president is on record for saying that that, you know, for as long as the corrupt invest within the country, then it is okay. So is there political will? I don't know. Is there political will to fight corruption?
There is. I will answer that, but I like to say that the chairman will prove you wrong that I can do it because this is glaring. It may take a while, but I know he will.
Why a while?
Because he has to get the facts. He has to.
The army has stolen maize for children.
Remember that the chairman appoints these people from what the population give him in terms of election.
Please don't abuse it for Ugandans.
They were voted, were they not? So, but nevertheless, I am saying for once, the chairman will prove you wrong. Now, no amount of defense can do this for whoever who took it. Procedures like Sarah was saying is well known. If anything, it should pass through the chief administrative officers. Either make requisition or get delivery. So, no chief administrative officer in any of these districts where individual benefited are aware about this. Now, strategy to fight corruption. Strategy to fight corruption is there. A lot of institutional measures are in place from the basic, from police, CID, IGG, anti-corruption unit in presence office, courts of law, prisons are there to imprison them, policies are there, all legislative procedures have been, legislations have been put in place, regulations there too, the political will is there too, the president has been talking it even on Taresita, all the will is there. But we are dealing with a living society. We are not dealing with a hard and frozen society. Even the suspects have brains, so they keep changing form like this other animal in the water. So it is a continuous struggle. So the strategy is there and it will be dealt with. I like to finally conclude by saying there's a difference between the scandal and NRM. There's a difference between the scandals and government. Culpable personalities are culpable in their own right. If I came from the secretariat and I defended them, then you take it as institutional framework. So I don't like the viewers to misunderstand that when the minister of Karamoja behaves ultra-virus, then it means the government there too. No, we don't condone this. We condemn in the strongest way terms possible. So please differentiate between the scandalist or the scandal members and our otherwise revolutionary and democratic government, which is bent on elevating the plight of the people. And that is why we keep saying the struggle continues. Because you do this, another does the other.
All right, thank you. Congressman, the People's Congress, post-independence, was at the forefront of arguing that Uganda must be a unitary state and that we should not be subdivided and, you know, into monarchies and things like that. Looking at what is happening in Karamoja, I think it's very appalling to all of us Ugandans. But my question to you is that, for the benefit of our viewers and perhaps in an attempt to find a lasting solution, do you think the OPM is structured in an ideal manner, that the Prime Minister must coordinate all government businesses, then under it has affirmative action ministries, it has disaster issues therein, but also the same office must lead the government, the NRM MPs in Parliament. So do you think that OPM is perhaps overwhelmed? And that is why so many of these scandals, even if the Prime Minister would have loved to supervise them, they're overwhelmed by many other things. And perhaps we need to restructure it to deal with these so many scandals.
You know, at the beginning, I was hoping that Mr. Awich from NRA Secretariat, assuring us...
And what?
NRM Secretariat, NRMO Secretariat,
NRM.
was going to agree with Sarah for the first time, and so therefore clearly seek to defend the rights and interests of the citizens and not that of NRA.
I did.
What is happening is criminal, and I suggest that any Ugandan or anybody who watches this must take a position that you're either with the people of Uganda, including particularly the most vulnerable citizens in this country, in this case, the people from Karamoja, or you're not. And this is both a moralist a question in which you must really be either with the people or you're against. I will find it very difficult that anybody associated with the NRA, NRM, SIC, to justify this, because as Sarah said, it's gone far too much and far too long. In fact, this is something that even if it was happening anywhere else in the Republic of Uganda, it would have been unacceptable. But to affect the most vulnerable of our peoples is completely unacceptable. Number two, this, in my opinion, the buck stops with the guy who called you a chairman, meaning Mr. Museveni. He's the ruler of this republic, and this is a criminal matter. And in normal democracies, possibly would be asking for him to resign, particularly because he's such a tired man that is not able to hold accountable the men and women whom he appoints, and these appointments are absolutely patronage appointments. That said, point number three, absolutely correct. My brother, sensible governments, like UPC governments, these are not things that should go to legislators. It's not the job of members of parliament to distribute things. You know, these are jobs that must be done through structures in part answering to you, through respective government ministries. Top civil servants are permanent secretaries, and through that, these are matters of local government. You know, to the extent that NRA even deceived Ugandans that they democratized. Of course, they bought this idea of local systems from UPC and then went ahead and made a mess of it. You know, we even have local councils at the lowest levels. These are administrative matters that should be done and dealt with through local government structures. It should not, and in fact, perhaps community development officers who are basically technocrats involved in communities. Yesterday, I was talking to a number of young people, and I was actually teaching one or two of the role of community development officers in our communities. And these are people whom I was speaking from charitable organizations, including one young lady whom I met through a program a few days ago. And I was reminding her that while she's working in charities, and while there was this argument that some of these charities are abused when it's convenient for Mr. Museveni, somebody like her was so committed would actually be part of a civil service organization, in this case at a local government structure, supporting communities. You talk about the disabled. These are roles of job of governments through a respective government department. And so clearly it's not a job of legislators, nor should it be anything that ministers should be able to touch, you know, things like, because they should be actually be busy doing so many other things in terms of strategic policy programs and pushing these things. So these are not political jobs. These are things that civil service and civil servants should be able to do. To the extent that my brother, I raised this thing going back, I think about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, including where legislators are given money to go ahead and allegedly popularize these things into referendum. That's not the job of MPs. And I'd like to rightly say, I think Sarah was saying that, you know, you'll have your supporters, you know. So it in itself puts you guys in a very difficult situation. Whom do I give? Whom don't I give? In most cases, you'll give these things to your supporters. But regardless, however objective you are, that is not your specialism. It's not your job to know how to distribute equipment. It's not your job to know, you know, how to nurse a particular emergency injury. Your job is to ensure that there are systems in place at local government level, in this case, whether it's Moroto, Nakapiripiti, or Tororo, that you know, hospitals have what they require, emergency services have what they require, and we've got staff who are sufficiently equipped, and if they're not, why not? That is the role of legislators. Under NRA anyway, it was from the beginning, an experimental arrangement, but it's an arrangement that while they tried to seek to know how to govern, you know, somehow the thing sneaked in, like Asaija would say when it's not about iron sheets, sneaked in until they turned into a situation in which now the business is about keeping one man in power, keeping Mr. Museveni in power, and for Museveni, as long as he's in power, people can go ahead and steal, you know, and he will shoot them down, as you rightly say, that, well, corruption, those powerful, corrupt mafia guys, you know, if you're able to keep them safe, they're not going to go in to talk to the ordinary Karamoja children and waken them up to the responsibilities of government. I say this as somebody who recently did a deep opinion piece on the question of street children in Kampala, majority of whom happen to be children, young people from Karamoja. And I wonder, do these funny ministers with the trail of escorts, when they reach traffic lights, whether it's in Kamocho or anywhere else, do they look at these and see them and say, call them citizens of our country? You know, you can go on and on and on. Comrade Awich and my young friend, as early as the 60s, we had programs for Karamoja. As early as the 60s, we had programs to address issues to do with the weather, the early deeps, the programs for forestation and irrigation, and including the issue of deeps. It's not new. These programs are there, and civil servants know this. If they've not torn up and destroyed some of these things are there. So some of the programs that are being talked about today, maybe these are per diem programs, where at every other opportune moment, election time comes, we begin to say that, well, what is the best way to capture Karamoja? No wonder it's not surprising that during break we're having conversations that amidst all this, why would the people of Karamoja support NRM? Now, for me to support, to defend that, it's the same things happening across the country. Because over 20 years, Mr. Museveni came, banned political parties, banned UPC, tried to sink us and other political organizations, saying that this movement thing, that's why Awich, although he's been a lawyer, he's trying to defend this NRM thing. But it's the same thing, really. And so people woke up, and by the time my brother here, we're now going into politics, there was nothing else but NRM. And many people went and simply said that, look, we hope there's a new stability. We've told wrong history that there was instability in Uganda caused by other people, and Museveni has brought peace. Let's let's go and sync with these people. After 37 years, I find it very unacceptable. And you realize that actually possibly I'm not responding and thinking straight, including the fact that as I came to this program, power went off, and I was wondering what is going on in my country that our people now want to believe and live with so much of impunity and unacceptability. I hope really that what happens following this are that you, my brother, the legislators and leaders from Karamoja, take a position and simply say, no, enough is enough. Considering that, considering what and how much you've been abused as a community, you should be able to take a position. I'm also saying that actually the people who took these iron sheets, like Awich was trying to say, no, they should not return with them. They should refund, but they should be actually criminally culpable. All the ministers or so-called politicians involved in this should resign, and of course, I mean, should be sacked really effectively. As I say, this thing goes up to Mr. Museveni. I know, although we want him to resign over these things, he's unlikely to do so. But the least he can do is to go to the people of Karamoja and apologize and very quickly say that, look, I have learned my lessons, and recompensate and double the efforts, including considering the fact that the timetable is already itself far off the scale. It's extraordinary.
Congressman, just clarity on one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that under UPC government, UPC 1, wasn't Karamoja a deportation region in this country? And correct me if I'm wrong.
Meaning what? And what is the relevance to this?
No, I am just asking because you spoke about apologies and things like that, and I'm just, for clarity, didn't the UPC government preside over a disenfranchised Karamoja population?
I still don't understand what you mean.
Clarity, exactly.
Do I understand? I think what he's saying is that
that because Karamoja was deprived, under UPC we should keep quiet.
No.
Presiding over. Is that what the question?
No, but you said there was a lot of. I think what prompted him or what imported him to your matter is a kind of a presentation that UPC had good programs.
Yes, we did, and we still do, and we'll
did,
provide them in the future.
If it did, why is it that at that time it was such a preserved, isolated place, more or less like the Matovu case?
Yes,
where the people were picked from here and
taken to Karamoja.
The Matovu case. It's like was an enclave out of the country. It was not networked, for example, with a tarmac road such that even if your person is put there, you can drive and see. So it was like the king of Uganda was taken to the Indian Ocean. So it was kind of an Indian Ocean inside.
Is that the context you mean?
The context just is not far from what you said. Is that you began your statement by saying that the UPC did preside over.
We started. Okay, let me ask.
And I'm just saying that.
Okay, let me ask you.
Do you concede?
I think I know what conceding would be a nonsense after 37 years. And actually, if you're using that program, after 37 years, we would not be having these conversations. If what you're asking is that what we picked in Karamoja in 1962, the best equalizer in any sensible communities, education. We provided schools. We built schools across the country, including in Karamoja. Every district we did. We provided health facilities across this country. Of course, we dealt with some of the issues of insecurity in Karamoja, but you remember we were there for 8 years, and then second nobody took government. We were there for 4.5 years. How long has the area been down there? I told you that actually we worked on irrigation programs, which we, thanks to Museveni and his friends, we were overthrown in 1971 when we were working on programs for, if you like, restocking and equipping and like providing irrigation schemes and programs for Karamoja. So these are things that you don't do overnight, but you put it in context. In fact, my brother, one of the reasons why I mean overthrow a government.
Can I seek a clarification?
Yeah.
Congressman, you talk of the beautiful program UPC had for Karamoja. Karamoja is such a huge area.
Of course.
As long as I know, there was only Moroto High School in the whole area. Moroto High School, nothing else. At least for the boys. Tell me any other school UPC built. 2, how is it that Obote was quoted somewhere saying we shall not wait for Karamoja to develop?
Yeah, we have to keep going.
I didn't want to say that myself.
No, yeah, because it was put in cultural context. It was put in cultural context. I know you guys, I know you NRA guys are trying to fudge this thing, but it's a much more important conversation to politicize in that context.
That huge area with Moroto High only.
And to talk these things down. In terms of schools, if you build one Moroto High School in 8 years, Obote 1, and all these are powerful schools across the country, I need to look through the figures. How many established public schools has NRA built in 38 years? 37 years.
Every sub-county.
Maybe, maybe I could come to what I think you're trying to say.
Yes, Mr.
I seem to have got that you're asking whether in Obote 1, Karamoja was still treated like an isolated area. No, it wasn't by that time. By that time, we had embraced, because when it reached time for independence, in fact, people who went to Lancaster, the team that went to Lancaster to advocate for independence, certain circles had actually requested representatives for Karamoja. They were represented from Karamoja in Lancaster House. I requested them to delay the independence of Karamoja. And this is what we got from the leaders. But they wouldn't. They didn't. And definitely the whole Uganda got independence at that time. To that matter, I'm saying, by the time of Obote 1, Karamoja was treated like the rest of the country. That's why the schools he's talking about was one. And by then, Moroto High School didn't come as a regional school. It was actually one of the schools in this country that was national in character. Up to the time I studied in 80s.
Absolutely.
Where you would get someone from Kabale.
Absolutely.
You would get someone from Arua. You would get someone from Buganda. At least I remember names, and I even met some of them who studied. It was actually national in character. But what I'm trying to say is, at that time, it wasn't like the way initially to get into Karamoja during colonial times, where you had to go and get a visa, in quotes, from Gulu to go to Karamoja. But by the time UPC was in place, at least Karamoja was in tandem with the rest of Uganda. And I think that's what you really wanted to.
I thank you for that. But let me just conclude it this way. I knew that was that, and I actually was bringing it deliberately, because I'm actually, on this program today, I'm actually quite emotional, and I find myself substantially emotional, and I really apologize, because it's a serious thing, just that, well, it's neither here nor there. In Obote 2, for your information, for everybody here, amongst the most powerful, the most influential political leaders in this country was Max Chowdhury from Karamoja. You get it? Today, the whole of Karamoja have got people, just like most of Toro, who are basically beggars for patronage over Mr. Museveni. Just think about it.
Mheshimiwa, the aspect that the Karamoja consensus, the Karamoja caucus rather of parliament, decided that their course of action is that they shall move, I think, a censure motion against the Minister of Karamoja. Was that the most appropriate course of action? That is one. 2 is that, I don't know, ever since the Ministry of Karamoja was established, have you had a minister from Karamoja holding that particular ministry in the history?
Yeah, maybe I would start with that one. Yeah, there have been Karamoja holding.
Okay.
Yes. One was Honorable David Pukol, who was the Minister of Karamoja, and also Honorable Peter Alkeris.
Yeah, why I ask is because, can we compare? Is there a distinction when that office has been held by a native from Karamoja vis-a-vis when it has been held by someone not from the region? Is there a distinction in terms of service delivery, in terms of other things?
Yeah, definitely there can be a distinction. And I want to actually follow up on that. You see, this is what we're saying, asking ourselves. You remember when they appointed Kitutu and Nandutu preside over
They have
Karamoja?
similar names, eh?
Yes,
And
they're all from Bugishi sub-region.
But if it's an affirmative action office, why are you bringing strangers?
Yeah, so that's the first reaction that came from Karamoja. There were actual protests left and right about appointing people who are not from the region. That there's no way, Karamoja cannot lack people who can really do that. You know, and it's always what I say, even during this disarmament program, that even if you think some of our leaders perpetrate this, there must be one or two good ones who someone can work with to make sure to do that. So there can still be Karamojons who can do that. If I was saying, if a Karamojong is a minister, I'm sure if such a scandal happened, it would be very easy even for me to just informally even tell him just walk away from this.
That's right.
Okay. I wouldn't have to beg even a minister.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have to beg even the president.
The accountability demand is high.
Yes.
And he fears it because he has both national accountability but also home accountability.
Yes. So it will be very easy to tell my brother, my sister, please, here you have really erred. Can you please step out of it? I would even tell them. But now with the Kitutu.
Nantutu.
we have issued statements.
Chitutu and Nantutu.
So we have really called on them to resign. We have called on them not even to appear in the region. But to formalize the process, we have to go by what we have done. We wrote a petition to Parliament, to the Speaker, and that's why she instituted that. She forwarded the matter to the petition to the Committee on Presidential Affairs. It is to formalize the process of one.
Is the police involved?
No, can I say?
Hold on.
I want to say
yes,
something.
That is our wing. But I just wanted to say that.
Honorable, brief on that process, if I may say something, in terms of information. You see, if the president was serious in his job as a head of cabinet, there would be no need for Parliament to struggle to censure a minister. He would have given them an order to step aside, and he would go ahead and fire them from cabinet. He has all those powers. But I will revert to my earlier statement that President Museveni today cannot fight corruption.
Yeah, so just on that is, we have done our part. We have written a vote of no confidence to the ministers as members of Karamoja Parliamentary Group to the president. That we have issued a vote of no confidence on these ministers. They don't have any audacity to run the affairs of Karamoja. We have written. Now, for us as the leaders, while we wait for that,
yeah,
we must
this is the power in their means. That's why they are following that.
We have written a petition to the Speaker. In fact, today it was even formally presented in Parliament this afternoon. And then we are waiting for that committee. Now, what we are doing as leaders of Karamoja is to make sure this is furthered. Today, when I was coming for this show, I was listening to the news that a town clerk of a Tiak town council was arrested because he sold, I think, equipment meant for some groups, I think agricultural equipment, generators. I was just saying, really, why couldn't police swing into action? Because this is the same thing that has happened in Karamoja. The iron sheets of the beneficiaries have been stolen and taken to Kitutu's relatives in Manafwa or Namisindwa, for example. Why can't police swing in action, actually, and arrest her? Because it is evident that these things were for Karamoja, not another place, and they have ended up in the wrong place. But what we are also saying is, as leaders, we are going to pressure this. We are going to continue with this fight. When we take the petition to Parliament, the censure motion, we shall see who in that Parliament is with us. But for us, we shall carry the elephant, however heavy it is, to make sure we have delivered for the people of Karamoja. Fortunately for us, we have been joined by even the local leaders, because she had tried to use the local, to use divide and rule by siding with the local leaders. against the national leaders. So fortunately, that is going to happen. Now, I also just wanted to correct one thing. You know, when my brother Awich says that there should have been an undertaking in the government procedures, a diversion is a diversion. There shouldn't be any reason for undertakings. If there was a disaster, there's a docket for disaster. They should have handled it that way.
I was just saying a worst case scenario.
So what am I saying? We are formalizing the process through that petition, while we are also using some other pressure groups to make sure this is done. I have also got information that at least the State House Anti-Corruption has been formally sanctioned to investigate this matter. But those are institutions of government. They report to different arms of government. But for us, as leaders of Karamoja, we are taking this responsibility through this process. And I feel it should yield. Yeah. But I know the end is, like the practice in this country is, ministers don't resign. So it is up to the appointing authority to swing into action. That's what I would definitely say.
Okay. Dr. Sarah, the MPs from Karamoja are moving towards censuring the Honorable Minister. The same parliament, not more than 2 months ago, censured another cabinet minister. Up to date, that particular individual is still serving in the office that they were censured from. Does censure offer a long-lasting solution to this particular crisis?
Maybe if I come to censure, I want to say two things. One is that theft is a matter of police. It's police business. And police should handle this theft of Karamoja iron sheets, of Karamoja goats. And they don't have to wait for any parliament or IGG or the paramilitary state house process. Two, in the public service procedures, if a person is under investigation, they step aside from office. So the lie by my friend, Afanda Wichi, that State House is investigating, when the ministers cannot step aside, is just that, a lie.
From Awich?
No. State House cannot investigate ministers and they are still in office. They should have stepped aside. So anybody who tells you that ministers are being investigated other than a parliamentary process, and I acknowledge that parliament has no power to order them to step aside. Any government entity pretending that they are investigating ministers without them stepping aside is a lie.
Doctor, how about their right enshrined under Article 28, Clause 1, the right to fair hearing? I don't know.
I thought the right court would be that a right to a presumption of innocence.
Yes,
I think that would be the right
right.
quotation. A presumption of innocence does not mean that you don't step aside when you're under investigation. These are public office standing orders in common law countries. You are under investigation, you pave way for investigation. It doesn't mean you're guilty. And it doesn't mean you don't have a right to defend yourself. You step away not to tamper with investigation processes. So anybody saying the two ministers of Tutu, whatever, I don't know what Tutu it is, Chitutu, Nantutu, that they are being investigated, it is a lie. They would have stepped away from office if they were under any investigation. So there is no investigation other than a parliament hearings. That's what in simple terms it means.
I just wanted to say that, by the way, what the Parliamentary Committee on Presidential Affairs is doing is not strictly for the censure. We want to formalize the process. We want to prove actually that these ministers have abused our office in a formal way. And we want to abuse, I also want to prove that she has mismanaged the institution. She has abused her office, which we shall prove that actually by holding that office, she was able to do unlawful acts. Unlawful because they are outside the law. And since they are outside the law, they are criminal because they are actually punishable. The type of acts are actually punishable by some authority.
Yeah.
Now, she has mismanaged because significantly she has failed to deliver in the institution in which she was doing. How has she failed? Money is provided to her to deliver goods, deliver iron sheets, and she has not.
Even the food was never
buys and
delivered.
gives
So
it
we are
away.
going to prove that. And that's a formalizing that actually she has abused her office, that she has mismanaged, and those are very, very gross
Mismanagement.
mishaps actually when you're managing a public office.
Yeah.
And once that is proved, what else should be done?
Yeah, so Parliament is following its own procedures
Procedures,
and rules as an institution. But we have negligence on what the other entities should have done. Cabinet has a duty to discipline their colleagues, headed by the president. He has no will or capacity to do that. Police has a duty to prevent and investigate crime.
Doctor, could you expand on lack of capacity to discipline his cabinet ministers? Is it because he benefits, or is it your allegation that the president benefits from the acts, from the corrupt acts of these individuals? Because when you say he lacks capacity, I'm trying to get my mind around
Lacks
that
the
one.
will, no?
He lacks both will and capacity, and I can substantiate. He lacks will and capacity, and I will the two are combined, and I will substantiate. Because of his greed for power, his only concern is royalty. It is not the conduct of people that serve under him. And his interest is, let me tell you, if any of these ministers was reported that they are whispering to Noop, he can even wake up in the middle of the night to act. But corruption does not bother him so long as you are royal. And that's why President Museveni today cannot fight corruption in Uganda. So he lacks both will and capacity because of his greed for power.
Then, what's your opinion regarding censure? Is it a solution that is really worth pursuing, given what we saw with the Honorable Namuganza?
I don't comment on censure based on the Namuganza case, because Namuganza case alone was problematic. So I want to look at the history of censure of ministers under President Museveni's government. The first censure was for Jim Muhwezi, when he was and Sam Kutesa. Jim Muhwezi for corruption and abuse of office with his dealings with the Sudil, then under Mera Investments, and Sam Kutesa over Enhancer and other issues he had done. When they were censured, after a few months, there were cabinet reshuffles and they were dropped from cabinet because the matters that caused their censure were a clear demonstration of abuse of office and of misconduct. When it comes to Namuganza's censure, Namuganza was censured for character. You are a bad person, you talk badly with people, It was basically character censure, as compared to Jim and Kutesa, who used their office for personal interest, who used the government offices for primitive accumulation of wealth, among other things. So you don't have abuse of office evidence on Namuganza. Even the grounds for censure was undermining committee, abusing rules of procedure.
Does that in fact justify the president's lack of action? Let me first justify.
Let me just first explain. So I have a different view on why Namuganza was censured. It had nothing to do with her conduct as a minister. It had everything to do with her character as a person. And I think that as much as Parliament acted as a mob, in one or the other, that censure can even be contested in courts. I don't think that, because this is an elected member of Parliament, you have no power to remove them from being an MP. They have abused the rules of procedure of Parliament. So what are you going to do about it? They are an MP for the next 5 years. And the rules of procedure of Parliament is not part of their job description as a minister. So if I was a president, I would have found it problematic myself to follow the conduct of Parliament on the censure of Namuganza, because it had nothing to do with her appointment as a minister. and then she's an MP, and you can't remove her from being an MP. So if she has abused rules of parliament, what are you going to do? She's a member of parliament. She has a bad character, agreed. But so, do you censure people because of character? Or it should be because of conduct? So, so whether the president will act or not, but that's my personal view about the censure of Namuganza. Should we resort to censures as the only procedure for disciplining ministers? No. The first responsibility to discipline cabinet lies with the head of cabinet. And the chair of cabinet is the president. These are his people, his staff. He appoints them. He chooses them himself. So it's like saying a father has badly behaved children and he cannot do nothing about it because the chief of the village has not acted. Whose first responsibility is it to ensure that you have a cabinet that upholds the constitution, that conducts itself in accordance with the social contract that you are acting upon? It is the duty of the president to dismiss, appoint, disappoint his cabinet, and he has a collective responsibility. So when you have cabinet ministers who behave like monkeys, stealing bananas when it comes to serving the people of Uganda, and you do not act, it therefore becomes contestable as to whether you are part of the monkey thieving or not.
Okay, we are due for a short commercial break, but we are glad that you have made a date with us this afternoon. Don't move a muscle, and see you shortly after this short commercial break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Viewers, we'll be back from that short commercial break. Retired Major, still on the issue of censure. What is the NRM's approach towards, for example, ministers that have a vote of no confidence levied on their shoulders? Do you consider them as people who have lost trust of the people and therefore they should vacate public office? Or you believe in the aspect of, give them a second chance? Maybe they will improve, maybe, I don't know. What is the strategic direction that NRM takes on how it handles ministers that are up for censure?
Okay, I get the question, but permit me to make some correction on errors that I felt were uttered by my colleagues. As I start with the congressman. The congressman is a man of sound standing, if I may say. But sometimes he makes statements which cannot be quantified. For example, he says in Obote's regime, Max Sondri was one of the most influential politicians in Uganda, or in government. But I like to say that, one, you can't measure influence. Do you measure the influence in no meter, influence in no gram? You don't speak things which are not quantifiable. Okay? Two, our methods, our revolutionary methods of work is different. You may find a Karamojong bishop, for example, or a Karamojong citizen, like the elders who spoke on the microphone, can be more appealing, and his views are given due weight than even that of Marx. But doesn't have to be put in public. Our revolutionary methods are different. So there are very many Karamojong whom their views are given due weight. Now, How you measure due weight and you said that of Marx was the most influential, I don't know. But for a fact, we know our revolutionary methods, even quiet people, ordinary people, whose views are given due weight from Karamoja, which weight could even be more than Marx in your days.
Except you don't consider their vulnerability.
Yes. So the views of Marx and which is unquantifiable, I disregard it. Then my friend Sarah, I think, just loves me. Even where I have not said something, she says I said it. Honorable said the State House Anti-Corruption is investigating. Sarah says it is major.
Okay, I thought it was you speaking for government.
So everything
it's also NIM. My point is...
So that rushing to me, even where I have not said anything, really, I don't know whether it is out of love or what, I don't know. But really, I count for my statements and I stand by my statements.
This is a program of love and peace.
So
and we're exemplary, especially to young people.
Now, your question was the question of censure and how government takes it. Censure is a constitutional provision. Parliament, presumably Parliament, is the National Assembly of all the 45 million Ugandans.
Presumably, yes.
Because we cannot fit in that house, so the Constitution says, let all those Ugandans come into that assembly in their representative capacity. So the law provides that if these Ugandans in this assembly, the 45 million who are represented by them, express their view, then it should affect the position. But we also know that a parliamentary resolution is not binding, it is persuasive, or it is informative to government. But I can assure you that government gives due weight to a parliamentary resolution, and it will be discussed and found, give a weight. Like Sarah gave example, the Kutesa and the Jim. The president did not want to seem to be acting in a mob way or in that emotional stress, but shortly afterwards, they were relieved of their duties. So a persuasive resolution like a censure, the president can even ask Namuganza to go and apologize. The president can suspend her. The president can himself offer an apology on behalf of her. So there are several things that should be done. In other words, we take a censure motion very seriously because a censure motion is an expression of the 45 million people. Okay? Much as it is not persuasive, much as it is persuasive, but we give the due weight. But sometimes the actions there too is procedural. As head of state, he has a lot of things to attend to. Maybe he has not thought about this, but somehow an action will be taken. It just can't be taken lying.
All right. Well, just like I promised my viewers, we shall delve into aspects of our national economy, and therein we shall look at factors like accountability, the budgetary framework, and the budget cycle generally. And let me begin with the Congressman. Just not so long ago, I think early this week, I saw the Minister of Finance requesting Parliament to avail it with another supplementary budget. Issues around, I think, the construction of Makerere University halls of residence, among other issues that they are in. So as we move towards evaluating how Uganda as a country runs its budgetary cycle, what do you make, for example, of supplementary budgets?
No, I think this program has had this discussion before, and I think Sarah and I were on it, on the question of how much this regime has abused the budgetary processes. And to the extent that we have people, including the Kasaijas and including technocrats whom we pay rather well, whose jobs it is to plan, to think, to research, and so therefore to go through a projection, one on annual basis, on, if you like, a short to medium term basis, a parliamentary cycle. And indeed, like UPC would do it over a 10-year program and design, which is basically what governments do, including projections for over 25 years. You project and put down there, regardless of whether or not then you'll be the party in government. So you continue. Under this regime, particularly because of the manner in which the national pot, is abused, a case in point is exactly what we're discussing today. I think it gets rather difficult for the respective departments, to meet their obligations. It's not surprising that there was a budgetary cycle, the normal annual budgetary cycle, which is supposed to be a very big thing. I met a group of students the other day somewhere, And one lecturer came and found me talking with them, and then he said, "Oh, UPC man, during those days when Obote is giving his budget speech, sort of the country came to a standstill because people were looking forward to a genuine possibility of a critique of what has happened, where the state of the nation is today, and what is going to be coming in the next 12 or so months. And it's real." So the budgetary process in this country is a political casual business where after the budget speech has been made, people go ahead and dance yellow NRA, go and eat and drink a bit in the State House. Some people go ahead and cut deals for allocations for who provided chairs, if it's something which is being done somewhere around the rural end of Nakasero, and it's business as usual. Clearly, we should not be going through budgetary processes, as a matter of going to the Malwa John. Today we went shopping the other day, and then we suddenly realized that we are short of money. Let's go back to the pocket. It's not that. You mentioned Makerere, which is my university, and as I said, I was Makerere the other day, and I looked through Mitchell Hall, my beautiful hall that we're able to construct within 8 years, and give it me to look at Mary Stuart Hall that we did very substantially. I know Awich used to know what some of these places are, and
I was in Lumumba.
Of course, we're in Lumumba. The whole that we built again within a very short period of time, and then since then, these places are collapsing. The point is, where our national thinkers, you realize that I'm actually not addressing it as in a manner in which I would normally do, and perhaps in structured manner in which Sarah would. I'm actually giving a very specific political response coming from where we are. That this is not a government of thinkers. This is not a government of planners. This is a regime that struggles to sustain itself and nothing else but sustain itself. If it is Makerere, can you imagine our national institution, the Harvard of Africa, comes in as a matter of under supplementary budget, as if there is no national planning.
But it doesn't qualify.
Where was it? So no, I think it is the case that supplementary budget tends to be used maybe as a cover to wrap up monies that have been chopped off by corrupt guys, or as an opportunity to get some extra vehicles. In this case, if we want to go ahead and bribe a few leaders from Karamoja, and of course, since we know we'll be passing via Sebe, stop over via Sebe, and then leave a few other trucks and vehicles and some yellow envelopes.
All right, fair enough. Mheshimiwa, you sit at on the table that appropriates this country's national resources. Time and again, we have seen the Minister of Finance coming to Parliament to say that, perhaps we did not budget for this and we need money for this particular item. But a country that has a national development plan, we have, I think, Agenda 2040 around there, but also we are part of the African Union Agenda 2060, something like that. I assume that we know where we are going. So how is it possible that our budgetary cycle is filled with more or less of the same thing? We budget either in excess or at times in deficit. So where is the issue? Is it because URA over projects its potential and therefore we find ourselves at a shortfall? So I don't know, how do you evaluate our budgetary cycle, for example?
Yeah, thank you. As you rightly said, we are at the table of appropriation because that's one of the roles of Parliament, is to appropriate the resources that the executive has planned for a period of the next 1 year or so. I just want to say that when this new Parliament came into place, we had an interaction with the executive through the Minister of Finance over the budgeting issues. And I think something that came out very, very soundly was the issue of supplementary budget. Because what we pointed out, particularly to the technical team, is, the issue of supplementary means that you're planning, you're actually exhibiting some planning incompetencies. Because, you are given a framework of 3-5 years to project, and then come to 5, 3, then eventually you 0 on 1, based on an existing development plan, which we are following. there are key issues that must be implemented. Normally, when a budget is read, there's some key interventions that actually government is supposed to implement in order to serve to cause service delivery for the citizens of this country. How come that within just less than 24 hours, actually I call it less than 24 hours because we passed the budget maybe in June, the financial year ends, the first thing that starts in July is spending on the 3% window. That actually is supposed to be. That's the question we asked them. And I remember categorically, we had also looked at the fiscal Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, their projection, their commitment to Uganda in the next 5 years on certain key macroeconomic issues. And they promised actually that such a thing would not be there. So actually I sit in the budget committee and we had an interaction when they formally presented the supplementary budget. And that was my first personal question to them that, the last interaction you promised us, this wouldn't be the case. Yeah, well, of course, when the ritual is this presented to us, our budget committee, then we also ask a few questions because for supplementary to pass, there are three key issues. It should be unforeseeable, unabsorbable, then unforeseeable completely. Okay? Unavoidable,
unforeseeable, and unabsorbable.
Yes, unabsorbable. But to me, I know the one which is difficult to meet is the unforeseeable.
How about unavoidable?
No,
Unavoidable will tend to be generally within the plan.
It can come.
Should really be hit. Yeah.
Yes, it can anyway pass, but the most difficult one is unforeseeable. So we receive the rituals we receive, and then we ask them those questions in principle, and then we forward to the other sectoral committees. Eventually, it will come to us, and then we look at it. But I think the issue is, for a fact, there's poor planning. And you never know, maybe some people are taking advantage of that. You know, Uganda is a very interesting country. When there is a crisis, that's when actually certain people, take advantage and profiteer. You can look at all these scandals we are talking about. They come normally during a crisis. They normally come during a crisis. And what also scares us is, if even the last budget, that was the last supplementary, is what has just been abused. We have just been talking about
That's correct.
So why shouldn't it scare a person scrutinizing this that there is definitely an issue? When you look at the documentation, the procedures, the policies that are in place, they are all okay. What the thing requires as an accounting professional is discipline. It's being principled. And if this was really followed to the book, these issues wouldn't be arising. They wouldn't be arising.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. Doctor, the budgetary cycle that we're discussing, by law, should end with the Auditor General's report. Now, we know that Parliament adopted an omnibus approach towards that particular report. Where does that decision leave the accountability framework and the entire cycle of budgeting?
Maybe briefly, if I may comment on the supplementary budget, which is also kind of a pandemic, because I don't think that this regime can do without the supplementary budget. And if there was if Parliament put their feet down on the three principles of unforeseeable, unavoidable, and unabsorbable, I think government would reinvent the crisis just to have access to money for routing.
If they fail to pass it,
Yes.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that, that Parliament should pass. Because on several occasions we are disappointed with Parliament. And it's only in rare cases that you would see a Parliament with a backbone. So most of the time, Honorable, your backs are bent and you are a very big disappointment to the people. I don't know, and they are, of course, not a person really. And there has been allegations also of bribery and kickbacks here and there, including rewards for having passed the budget, that 40 million. Some people received it. I didn't see your name. I hope you did not receive. So really, a parliament has been another forum for disappointment for the community, for the people of Uganda. And the obvious question I would ask if I were a member of your committee on budget is, where is the money supposed to come from? Our budget, our public debt has surpassed 80 trillion. It's 86, 87.
86,
Yeah,
89.
87 trillion. Our resource envelope is small, projected to rise to 28 trillion in the next budget. Yeah, but what are the chances that it will increase? So for me as a citizen, really, my first question is, why can't we live within our means? This regime has been borrowing indirectly against oil since 2005, against oil revenues since 2005. The international community that keeps lending us money, even when there is no value for such borrowed funds, hopes that they can recover if everything else fails because of oil reserves. From 2019 to today, we have depleted our national reserves as a country by half, from $6.96 million, 3 point something. Honorable has figures. We have depleted our national reserves through debt servicing and payments. Just, I think by the end of this year, we have an IMF loan that is maturing. If that loan matures today, we are likely to find ourselves in zero reserves as a country. Anybody who claims to be a security expert knows what that means for a country without reserves. So we are not just increasing public debt, we are depleting national reserves, and that's an economic crisis that we are not looking at. As you pass supplementary budgets, you can pass them all you want. Do we have the money to cover the budget until June this year? Mheshimiwa, do we have money?
There is money.
There is money
Already.
through what we have borrowed.
Partly borrowed, but also the local domestic revenue, domestic revenue sources.
Domestic revenue projections for this financial year, we are 22 trillion. Out of those 22 trillion, 17 trillion are going into debt servicing. Which revenue are you talking about? The balance of 5 trillion that cannot even cover our security budget as a country? Mheshimiwa, is that true or false? Look in the camera and tell citizens.
I will submit.
Yes, that is this financial year ending June. Our revenue projections were 22 trillion. I know that URA has done shortfalls in their last year reports. They did shortfalls. So even that 22 trillion, you might not get it in this financial year. Out of that 22 trillion, 17 trillion is for debt servicing. So as a country, we remain with 5 trillion out of our collections. We cannot, even as a country, cover our security budget, which is 7.1 trillion. So which money are you talking about? Just to borrow and mortgage Ugandans in useless debt with no value? Which money is Honorable talking about that there is money to pass useless supplementary expenditures? So when I say that Parliament has disappointed this country, as a country, you cannot cover your security debt. Do you know what that means? Your security budget, we don't have capacity to cover it. So as he tells people that there is money, which money is he talking about? And why do they pass such stupid expenditures to burden a taxpayer, including unborn children?
I will give Mheshimiwa a chance much more later on.
Just very quickly.
Before I move to retirement.
Indeed, just very quickly. Thank you for that. By the way, in normal democracies and in democracy under UPC, as I said, my Charlie, when budget day comes, this is what should really happen, by the way, and young viewers particularly. You know, budget speeches are qualified statements qualified figures,
They are policy.
contested figures,
Yeah.
policies, and they're up to speed on each and every bit. Why? Because projections over, say, for instance, the next 100 days after the budget, their critiques, how are we doing, how are we performing. After the next 12 months, it becomes a big, in normal democracy, a big national political conversations. If the ruling government must have to justify that they did their projections right, that they did their allocations right, that where they got wrong and what and how. In fact, these are the basis of citizens critiquing, determining, and actually supporting political parties and organizations. There is something else which is also missing here. Away from NRA, you will be relieved. Political parties. Clearly, this conversation should be away from Ochieno as a critique. But what is the UPC position on this? What is the NUP position on this beyond the controversies about securities and Mbue and my good friend Felix Kuleiji? So these are matters that become political party conversations, contestations. Doing this means, therefore, that our citizens in Karamoja, our citizens in Nagongera, our citizens in Uganda know that while I've been paying my taxes, this is how the state has planned. The alternative about UPC is putting Ochieno to task and say, you are criticizing that they've given smaller allocations to health, Sarah. How much would you put? And in the event that they put to health 2 trillion, citizens watch. And Ochieno, for UPC saying we'll put 5 trillion. Do you know normally what journalists and professionals say? Ochieno, you're saying 3 trillion, just to qualify your point. I have to explain where I would get
The source.
the 3
So what is
trillion
the source of
to
money
back that
you are
up.
proposing?
Those are national conversations that actually do take place. But because this is a regime that is full of impunity and they're doing it like household, that's why I made my submission short. Sort of like the treasury is a pot. And Museveni borrows and
But
he's
it's
borrowing
also
for himself
empty.
and his grandchildren.
The treasury is empty.
And the reaction from Sarah is this, that no, this affects me. And for those of us who are on this one, by and large, we're not particularly bad. But for some of those rural children who cannot afford to go to school, but whose great-grandchildren have got to come back and pay for this, no, it's criminal.
Scam. There's scam.
Retired Major, I think last week you were here and you told us how you sat in a meeting that approved borrowing of some money for some project. But that is perhaps besides the point. The point is that if you look at our debt burden as a country, moving towards 86 trillion now, and we anticipate to even borrow much more money. Is the NRM planning well for this country?
Scam.
I think as a young person, looking at those numbers, it's a bit worrying.
3 times what we can afford.
It's a bit worrying. So,
Okay. Now, I just want to comment on a few other things before I come to borrowing. Once again, my congressman makes very sweeping statements. He says that this is not a government of thinkers.
Of course not.
Where's the evidence?
Congress. You cannot say this is not a government of thinkers and you stay in power for 37 years. Are you staying by God's grace?
No, by military power.
But we know
But
how you're
even military
staying.
power needs
You are
thinking.
banning people's just...
Okay.
Even
Or
military
then I
power
give you
needs
government of
thinking.
military powers and military
Needs
thinkers
thinking.
will find.
On the
yes.
contrary, Congress, somebody was telling me, your government and the army, that what used to happen was, you see, they had been coming from Tanzania, from exile. So what UNLA used to do, they would sit in Nakawa and say, we are not going back to the bush for a second time. Okay?
UNL meaning
You
including Mr. Museveni, isn't it?
That was when Museveni was already in the bush. You see, hear that statement. Then the next statement is, but you had us bush. You had more beer. As if there was a connection between not going back and having beer.
Now you're going back.
And yes, as if it was a choice not to. Now, if you say this is not thinking, the other one was thinking, you better.
Just because Museveni doesn't drink
And then
alcohol,
after 4 years,
you want to simplify.
and after
this.
4 years, you are not there. Are you thinking?
No, we were overthrown. Actually, had elections taken place.
If you were thinking, you wouldn't have been thrown.
By
Now,
UDP
apart from that sweeping statement that a non-thinking government stays for 37 years by grace of God and repeatedly
don't invoke God on this.
Repeatedly winning election for every 5 years.
Like we
you have to think again whether it is not thinking. Anyhow, first on the appropriation, I think as a government we have tried our best. We have all the legal provisions. The Constitution is there, the Appropriation Act is there, and all of it are there to the letter. Okay? So, that is in place. The other thing is, most supplementary, you have already defined it. But I like to say that most supplementary come as a demand to the executive. In fact, government hates it. Government hates it. But then you can't avoid it. There's a situation like in Karamoja, there's a situation like in Kasese, all that. But it's not the will and the interest of executive to go for supplementary, not at all. Every time it comes, you even see the minister looking at you with a bad face. So, we don't celebrate it, we don't praise it, it comes as a pressure. Okay? The only thing that I want to say that all of us condemn is the discipline associated to the discipline associated to a supplementary fund. If a supplementary fund, which is an emergency situation, is given to Karamoja, please, we all wish in the party, in the government, that discipline should be attached to, and that's why I was telling Sarah for once, I will side with her that whoever diverted iron seats or even overquoted cost of gods for Karamoja
should go to jail.
Is culpable. And I was saying that for once, the chairman should prove to Sarah that he can act.
I'll be waiting.
Prove Sarah wrong. I want the chairman to prove Sarah wrong, that you said I can't act. Now I've acted. Okay? Now, borrowing, even in your home, it's not a good thing. Even in your home. To borrow, to sustain your family, to buy food for your family, to pay school fees for family, is not a good thing. It's not a desirable thing. And more so for a government. But I would like to say that even rich economies like Japan, like United States, they have borrowed and borrowed. In fact, they have much more in percentage than Uganda. Did you know that? Did you know that Japan has a lot of debt?
Put to the context.
Do you know that United States has a lot of it?
Put to the context.
So you can't run a government in that, because naturally or economically, no government can generate enough resources. Maybe if you had
that's
in the
information
case,
on the big economies.
Richard Major, are you
That's
following
information on the
let me
big
finish.
economies.
I didn't ask for.
No, you didn't ask.
No,
I just want to inform the viewers that the big economies
Richard Major, can you just
have
take this?
capacity to pay back.
But
And
why
when they borrow, they invest to grow their
Yes.
economy.
But they have not paid.
That's the difference.
That's why they have debts. That's why Japan has. That's why United States. If, for example, last year United States borrowed and they have paid, they wouldn't be having debts. They would have paid in financial, borrowed to 2021, 2022. By 2023, they have paid. But they have not. So what do you say that they borrow and they have capacity to pay? Then why do they have debts? They have carried forward debts in trillions. So debt exists in all governments in the world. Now, the only thing that I was saying is that, and by the way, the compliance rate in Uganda, the percentage, as it appears sensational, we have not surpassed it. We haven't surpassed the required level. So, much as in a home budget, borrowing is not desired. Much as to a country, borrowing is not desired. But it is unavoidable. All governments around the world do it. We only have to go back to the discipline. Are you borrowing for a real cause? Are you disciplined? We all need to join hands for discipline. Because misappropriated funds is a evil to all countries, regardless of parties, whether I'm in NRM or I'm in NU. So we need discipline for that. But borrowing per se is not a prohibited, or is not a bad thing. All governments borrow. Except you find governments like Libya in the times of Gaddafi, who could generate surplus You have countries maybe like Qatar, or you have countries like Brunei Darussalam, who is floating on oil.
And we ever had a
or you have
surplus
country like this richest country in Europe is called Liechtenstein. It's between Switzerland and Germany. Those are the richest country in the world. Those one can do their own things because they have more than enough money. Okay? Even Germany has this, but Liechtenstein doesn't. Even Switzerland, I'm not sure, but Switzerland is a very disciplined country. So, borrowing is not something that is so alien. Most governments borrow, except a few countries which don't. But we all must join hands in the discipline of a borrowed money.
All right, thank you. Mheshimiwa, I'm sure you have concerns, but as you respond to that, I want to just put a question to you. When you sit in those budgetary meetings and in an attempt to rebuild this country's economy, do you go back in time and say that perhaps the structure adjustment programs was a wrong decision for us? Because those particular programs that we adopted in the 1980s encouraged borrowing. You know, low-income countries were encouraged to borrow from the IMF. So do you think that it's about time we began to rewrite some of those wrong decisions that we made? Of course, as you respond to the concerns that have been put to you.
Yeah, structural adjustment program was a wave that had come that time. And it was, I think, something irresistible.
Thanks to the UPC government. 1980s, yeah.
No,
In what way?
This was in 19.
No,
this was in this regime, the structural adjustments program.
1980s.
There were, of course, the spillover from the other bit.
Yes.
But it was something irresistible for any LDC that time because it came with its packs, which were so attractive. You know, that's when the window of
liberalization,
free
market
especially waiver for highly indebted countries.
Yes.
It came with those type of things.
Yeah.
Post liberalization. It was the way to go. But I think the borrowing that came with it is not. In fact, borrowing is not a problem. But what you use the borrowing for is, and how you manage that is actually the issue. So I wouldn't say that. Well, of course, definitely there should be reversal of some decisions that are not really helping us economically. If they are not helping us in economic growth, economic development, and also social development, then definitely something has to be looked therein. I just wanted to, first of all, react to something. You know, everyone is really disappointed with Parliament because we are the ones who passed this budget. Sure,
it's all your fault.
reasons, really.
And you are mandated to get us value for money.
Yes, yeah, of course, that disappointment is valid. Depending on where you're standing, but I think I want to say that we really play our role. You know, when these budgets come, it is an intervention that the sitting government wants to use, translated into a budget, into figures, and now it wants to implement sort of thing. We play our role. We scrutinize, as for example, the budget committee and eventually Parliament, knowing very well that during the implementation, there are already structures, there are frameworks to handle implementation, and then later the oversight bit comes that we also do. So we expect that at various stages, we also play both at the entry and also at some part of the implementation and eventually the accountability part of it. We do that, but it is not that we do it without the thought of an average citizen that needs the service. Most of what we approve is really when it is illustrated or explained that it is to deliver service delivery. If along the way things go bad, we know we can definitely catch up with it at that moment. On the issue of the omnibus passing, but that's not the practice of Parliament. It was just because the other Parliament was ending, and I think the decision by the Public Accounts Committee, I think ended that time by Honorable
Nandala Mafadi,
just decided to actually do away with most of those reports.
But you have repeated it now.
No, we don't do omnibus passing of accountability reports. No, it may not happen. Because one, there's no backlog. It is because of the backlog actually that had been created previously. That's why it was able to do that. But it is not something that is a normal practice. You talked about when a supplementary budget is, there should be a defined source of revenue. That is one of the tests, actually, that I didn't mention. That's one of the tests we put in principle as the budget committee before we even send the work to to other sectoral committees to go through that and then revert back to us. So that's one of the tests. There has to be, according to law, the resources to fund it must be identified.
Which is
And
the
what we
source
make
now.
sure, it is not from disadvantaging any other aspect of service delivery. That's what we make sure it doesn't. Now, when we come
May
to
I
borrowing,
ask on that one, Honorable, briefly?
yes.
Because our Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, which extended to 53% in this financial year because of COVID, we have already reached that 53% of borrowing. So I would like to know what is the source of this proposed supplementary? And are you ready to go above the fiscal charter?
No, actually, by the way, I want to assure viewers and also Dr. Sarah that we are actually keen to this. The borrowing that government is doing is actually already approved by Parliament. It is just this is just actually the execution of what we had already approved.
They couldn't absorb. You approved the borrowing outside the
Yes.
budget.
No, within the budget. This actually the borrowing they are going to do is already within the approved budget.
It's internal borrowing.
Internal and even for domestic and foreign borrowing. That one is already provided. So that's why it definitely has to take place. But I wanted to mention, like Adalia mentioned, the issue with borrowing, it can even go up to 77% debt to GDP ratio, which measures debt to GDP ratio, measures the inability of a government to use the value of goods and services produced to pay its debt.
Ghana declared bankruptcy recently.
No.
They were at 80%
no,
GDP.
That's the measure. That's the definition of debt to the GDP ratio. It is the measure of a country's ability to produce goods and services in that period that can offset debt if there is nothing else to fund it. Okay, that's what. So it can even go to 77%. But now it goes to other things. One, if in your borrowing you're sure the borrowing was productivity, something that can actually trigger the economic growth. Of course, if you invest it on some sectors that actually can generate revenues, just like the money you borrow from a bank. When you borrow money from a bank, you should demonstrate that you should be able, where you're going to use it, to generate money to pay back. That's how government should be considering, and that's what we advise government now, that actually use that seemingly private sector approach to borrowing to be able to do that. If you are able, you can even borrow money, as long as you're sure that when it generates revenue that can, at the time of demand or the call of that loan, you're able to pay. There's no problem with it. That's actually the assurance that people should have, that at the time of call of the loan, the money should be there. That should be our more concern.
Do we have money for IMF?
No, that should be our concern for. But then I want to tell you that according to the budget proposals of that, all the debt obligations are also provided, because those are the statements that you offer. And that one is demonstrated on the 50 trillion proposal. And then I also wanted to call, actually this year it is anticipated that URA will collect 25 trillion.
Last year it was in shortfall.
Yes.
What is the magic?
Yeah, well, now if we use the trend analysis, it has been collecting averagely 94%. So you can say that it will collect 94% of the 25 trillion. Now, doesn't mean that actually that money is enough to finance our budget. But what I'm trying to say is, even if we borrow, as long as we are sure that we borrow for the productive sectors. Two, that at the time the loan matures, we're able to pay. Okay? And then it should not suffocate the country in case of a situation that requires borrowing. For example, if we need money for some dire need for social services, if the borrowing has some breather, it is okay, so that we're able to deliver them. So those are the conditions that actually we should meet. It can go to 53, but according to the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility, it will peak to 53, and then it's supposed to go. Those are the questions we shall ask the people who are managing this economy. Why is it sustained at 53 or gone beyond 53, yet you are projected
To go down.
Yes, to go down. Those are the questions we shall ask at that time. Because they gave us the projection for the 5 years and we have these figures and we are monitoring. And every other year when they are reading the budget they are presenting to us, we make sure there is a reminder. That's our oversight role.
All right.
I have one question before you ask me. In the last budget, I know that according to the Public Finance Act, the government can reallocate 3% of the budget, but it should be for one, agreed priorities in the overall budget, but also to the other three conditions of unforeseeable, unavoidable, and unbearable. Parliament, immediately after the approval of this budget, used money on what I would call Minister of Finance on careless spending. Careless spending, including money to build a bar in Ochieno, 800 million, that they call a marina to confuse people that it is a bar. It is a bar. The marina, so-called marina from Ochieno, where taxpayers' money has gone, is just to build a bar. There's money for the sugar factory. Young sugar factory, yes, at Yak sugar factory that you had vetoed as Parliament. And there's money that the Ministry of Finance has used to pay on some consent with the energy company that the minister was trying to explain yesterday, Minister of Finance.
Albatros.
Yes. Are you incapable of taking action as people's representatives?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bireete. I want to tell you that if you really closely followed the last year's, this current budget that is implemented, what you have mentioned, one was the convention center for the non-aligned movement conference that's supposed to be held by Uganda. That one we vetoed, we didn't approve it because the Ministry of Finance or the political head of that ministry could not afford us a good explanation on what all that was. Because this is what they are supposed to do. For any money that you want to spend, you should be able to justify exhaustively so that it is plausible to us. We vetoed it. They attacked sugar, we said no. The other year, we passed the money to buy shares in attack, and there are conditionalities as a parliament. I'm sure those are things that will come to us. We also had vetoed it. And then, well, I don't know about the bar, but I know it was a convention center.
It's a bar.
You will that's your word, but at least I know it is a convention center.
Okay. Are you capable of action?
No, what I'm saying is we vetoed it. We didn't pass it in the first budget.
They've been paid.
I'm yet to know. I know it. If it is among the supplementary items, then it will come to us and we shall give it the due attention that it requires.
Okay, thank you very much.
But I want also to assure you
our time is. Mheshimiwa, I'll give you a chance to make your last words, but for now, our time is fast spent and we have to be out of here. So I'll give all of us perhaps maybe 90 seconds to give us our last words. Yes, Congressman.
Your mind would be precisely that. No, I just wanted to help my good colleague here that actually the SAP that you're trying to talk about, Structured Adjustment Program, indeed actually came up in the early 80s, in fact, from about 1981 or thereabouts. Yes. And the first nations through whose hands these matters were put, IMF and World Bank, were Ghana and Uganda. And I can proudly say that UPC rejected it. We rejected it in its old form, and we rejected it because we had our own programs as a party, the thinking party. We said, well, this is where we are going to source our money, this is what we have, this is what we're going to borrow, and these are our priorities. And we rejected the idea that the plans for education in this country and health should be sorted out by guys in Washington, and that the plight of our civil services, public servants, not only that they should be cut off chopped by half, so that they be made beggars should be resolved by the privileges of guys in suits in air-conditioned places in dubious corners. So we rejected it. So we were able to make sure that from 1981, by 1984, Uganda's economy had net turnaround, meaning ownership for our peoples going forward. Meaning, therefore, come 1986, under NRA found a very disorganized system, because for the 6 months they're fighting their friends, the Okellos. but the country was not particularly broke. So when Museveni came, there was no justification really to go ahead and kneel and beg to these guys. And considering that these guys claim that they came from the bush as Marxist revolutionaries, the last place to go to was IMF and World Bank and beg and say yes and kneel on their behalf and sell the hearts and souls and the future of this country, including selling our banks and institutions that UPC struggled to build for this country over the previous administrations, which basically what SAP and structural adjustment program are. What Museveni has done has been a sellout, and that's why it's official, but they called him the Nyampala of these agencies across Africa. So Uganda, unfortunately, that you, a recent legislator, you're following what Museveni had every reason to reject. Unfortunately, he looked into it, and now we have to struggle to make sure that we're able to realign ourselves and reclaim the space. So that's the context in which the young man was saying. Although, of course, he was being cheeky, he thought actually that no, the problem was us. No, we had managed to reject that, and actually we're going to be the future to try to reclaim the mess and reorganizing for the future going forward. Quick observation. The issue is not whether or not we should borrow. By and large, although, the issue was whether or not we pass a budget and in 6 weeks' time, an emergency budget is brought in the name of supplementary, and which budget is not sufficiently justified. And that's rightly said. In many cases, the monies are actually organized as emergency, but really there are things for people to go ahead and buy the next tranche of land cruisers in town. It's shameful, and I think something that should be stopped. And I actually hope that as we go forward, we should be able to have conversations about national budgets and scrutinize the NRA budget, national budget, NRA manifesto, as we should also be scrutinizing manifestos of other political parties and organizations. I hope it really becomes a practice of the future, that when we're doing these other things, when national budget is coming, critiquing NRA, UPC should be tasked that what would you do, if you're in government. That is what democracies are. And then the more we do that, the more I think the citizens across the board will get engaged. And finally, to close, it was extraordinary that which was trying to say that when it comes to dubious deals by NRA ministers, that it is not a political party thing. The first port.
What did they say?
The first port of people to actually check would normally be political party organs, like you say, party headquarters, to ring these guys and say, look, you guys are embarrassing us. We are going to lose elections. You're embarrassing us because we're finding it very difficult to explain and defend the positions at civic space. The more you do that, the more these people will know that you, as party agents, when you go around talking to people, you're finding it increasingly difficult. And I'm delighted that many of you guys are coming to Uganda People's Congress. And, this is something that you can actually take back to them, and maybe they will begin to reconsider the manner in which they take some of the issues that we discussed today going forward.
Thank you. Yes, Richard Moja, your last words.
My last words is that I'll combine what he has put forward with my last words. Indeed, we came to power with a lot of reading, literature, and the spirit of revolution. We read a lot of dialectical materialism, historical materialism. We read a lot of political economy and scientific socialism.
You were theoretical.
In effect, it gave us the strong tools of analysis, which we don't regret, because it is real natural science which gives the dialectics of society. Now, about going to IMF, even if you read that literature, there is a provision called the National Democratic Revolution. That is the stage where you used actually capital from capitalism for the betterment of your people. So it's not way outside.
Okay.
Read it again.
Good.
Now, my last word is that as a party and as a government, we have challenges of cadres who are actors. But the government, we have a 5-year manifesto program, and in it, we have the duty to protect the livelihood and the welfare of our people. So resources like the one in Karamoja is condemned in the strongest terms possible, and we hope that the chairman will prove Sarah wrong, that he can act. And also, we wish that our cadres who are in parliament, who are them, our cadres in parliament, because today we have the biggest number of our flag bearers the biggest majority.
You have already.
So our cadres in parliament will always do due diligence to the good, proper legal framework in budget procedures so that our people get the best out of budget that we give. And they are there. That is my last word.
Thank you. Doctor, your last words.
Well, first is on the issue of Karamoja. It's a shame and an embarrassment to President Museveni. And I can bet that he has no capacity anymore to fight corruption in Uganda. And that leaves the people on their own. You can see how Parliament is struggling, ad hoc this, ad hoc NSSF, ad hoc what. All of that is evidence of an incapable presidency in Uganda because they are ad hocing on his cabinet. And his inaction, his contuned inaction, should be a message to the people that it's high time he left the seat he's occupying. My second comment is on Parliament. Yes, we acknowledge that you are firefighting because of an incapable executive, and don't give up. Keep firefighting for the services of your people. In the 37 years, Parliament has always been dominated by NRM. So the inaction of the cabinet, inaction of Parliament where they have failed, is the failure of NRM. And nobody can run away from that. As for the people of Uganda, you can do better next time.
Mheshimiwa, you have the final last words.
Yes,
on the show.
thank you. On the matter concerning Karamoja, I want to say that I think there's no Ugandan who says they have not had this. I think every adult in this country has had this matter. And definitely, those who are charged with the responsibility to take action on such matters should come really and play the role. But as the leaders of Karamoja, we are going to use all what it takes to make sure that what was due for Karamoja is delivered, is received. Because these acts are despicable, these are criminal acts that actually the laws should have, the institutions that are mandated to do this should have swung in action. But we shall keep the momentum and make sure that those who are involved are brought to book. Then on budgeting, I want to say that we have our commitment. 11th Parliament is very committed to check the executive as much as possible. And on matters of the budget, we have seen also some lapses in the existing legislation. And I think there might be need to address those issues. It might be difficult to get a bill from the executive, possibly a private member may have to move actually a bill to address some lapses that are in the law that people are trying to take advantage, not to deliver services to this country. In fact, for those who are taking it, it might not be those who intend to deliver services. It might be some other actors that are taking advantage of this situation. So I think we shall address those lapses and we shall take the initiative, those of us who are directly involved.
Fiscal and monetary tools are what is applicable, not these other ones. Stick to those.
Yeah, so I think that's what may have to be done.
All right. Asante sana, retired Major. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for being on the show. Thank you, Doctor. And of course, thank you, Congressman, for making the time to be on this week's episode of the Citizens Chat Show. Well, I don't want to dilute what has just been discussed here, but rather wish you a lovely Friday evening and afternoon. And thank you for, of course, watching this show. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like on the like button right below this video. And have a lovely weekend. See you next week, same time, same place.